Hi there, welcome to podcast episode number 24, I believe. I check which episode I'm on every single time, I can never remember, and then every time I start gaslighting myself, thinking that at some point, like 6 months ago, I might have made a mistake in counting, and I'm actually on a completely different episode, and then I think I should go back and check every single episode to see if I've numbered them correctly. And then I think that's insane, it's not that deep. And then I just start talking to the camera with the number that I assume is the correct one. So I think we're at 24. I have acquired a coffee and also 2 new finished objects. One of them is a bit of a surprise, I guess. This is the one I'm wearing, and then I have one that I've been working on for a little bit longer. But this one actually you haven't seen at all yet. I have one whip on my needles only currently, and I'm planning to add a second one really soon. I have yarn on the way. I have acquisitions this time, that never happens. So where do we start? I think we should chat about the one I'm wearing first, probably. This wonderful top here is called 𝗙𝗚𝗡𝗏𝗡𝗗. It is a design by 𝗙𝗜𝗡𝗏𝗡𝗗, who I've somehow featured in my pattern roundups about 1 billion times, and I have at least 20 patterns of hers in my favorites, and I've somehow never made any of them, so I'm really glad I got to this one. I have made this somewhat spontaneously and very quickly. I think I needed less than a week probably to complete this. It is still warm because I just took this from outside, like it was drying still, and I just put it on. So now I'm insanely hot because this has been laying in the sun and it is black. How this happened, essentially, at the beginning of summer, I really wasn't sure where to go with my summer knitting this year, or if I even wanted to do proper summer knitting. Because last year I really noticed that I barely wear my summer knits in summer, just because even if it's a summer design and a summer yarn, it is still too warm for me to properly wear when it's hot out. So I've been wearing like some of my summer knits in the winter, like layered, or I've been wearing them in the spring or in the fall if the weather was like appropriate for that for like 2 weeks. So I just haven't been using them as much. I didn't quite know where to go, and I just needed a little bit of time to think about where I wanted to go for summer because it hadn't occurred to me to do that before. So I did a pattern roundup video where I introduced a bunch of summer tops, and when I make a roundup video I like to choose at least one of the designs to actually make myself, just because it's a great like planning type video for me as well. And I did choose a different design from that video actually to make, and I got yarn for it and I got the pattern, and I did start on the pattern. I knitted the size that was recommended for me, and when I got to like the point where I had both the front and the back panel of the top kind of done, I noticed that it looked very small. I measured my gauge again and it was the correct gauge, and I was confused, and I looked through the pattern and I realized that a lot of the stitch counts didn't at all match up with what sizing was recommended. So when I took the stitch counts for my size and I converted them into centimeters, it made a top that wouldn't have fit me. So it just wasn't a great pattern, which is a bit unfortunate, but I am in contact with the designer and hopefully we can somehow resolve that issue and make sure that the pattern is like working properly and everything. But that just meant that for right now I'm not gonna be making that pattern. And I had the yarn that I got for it at home, which is this drops called merino over here that I was very excited to try. I've heard good things about this from a few different people online, but mainly from Isabella from Breathing Yarn. I think she knitted a lot with this, and from what I remember from her videos, she had nice things to say about it. And it seems like a good yarn for me because, as I was saying, a lot of the things I'm knitting end up being very warm for me, so even for sweaters and stuff like that, I think this might be a good option from a warmness level. So I just wanted to try it, and I had, I think, 6 balls of it, and that matched up with the 𝗙𝗚𝗡𝗏𝙗 top as well. The reason why I didn't choose it originally is because it has this large cable in the front, and I've never done cables. I have swatched with cables a few times, like I generally know how they work. I've watched a tutorial or 2. I have used like a cable needle and stuff like that. Like the general concept of cables I'm familiar with, but I had never like actually knitted a design that included cables. And my plan was a little bit to do that in fall. I do still want to do like a proper cable knit sweater in fall, winter, sometime this year. And I was gonna make like a whole big deal about it, like making my first cable knit sweater and whatever. So I thought maybe this is a bit too like low-hanging fruit to try because it's just one giant cable, and I thought it can't be that hard, which it wasn't. It genuinely was very simple to do, but that was due to the written instructions. I'm still not quite sure I completely comprehend how cables work, especially not the cable charts. Like the lines in there, from the direction they make sense, but then from the stitch counts that are displayed in the little chart, it doesn't quite make sense to me yet. I might have to like actually do a fully like cable knit sweater that is a little bit more complicated to force myself to learn that, I guess. Or maybe it's just not supposed to make sense. I don't know, maybe you're just supposed to have the little symbol and then refer to the written instructions. I'm forgetting about my coffee. Anyways, I now got at least a little bit of experience in cable knitting in, and this was genuinely such a fun and enjoyable project to do, which is why I finished it in under a week. I knitted a size 4 in this, which wasn't quite what I was supposed to do. I went for like 0 centimeters of ease, and you're supposed to have 6 to 12 centimeters of negative ease. I'm not 100% sure how my decision-making process was. I think it was late at night. But I think I looked at the sample picture, and the top there, it isn't loose-fitting, but at least around the waist, there's a little bit of room, and I did like the way that that looks. And since I'm already kind of struggling to wear my summer knits when it's warm, I just think it makes sense to not make them super tight if I don't have to. So I went for a size 4 and I knitted on 3.5mm needles. It recommends 4mm needles, but it has a 20 stitch gauge, and I've been knitting DK weight yarn on 3.5mm needles at a 20 stitch gauge for what feels like the last 2 months. I didn't even gauge swatch. I don't know what's happening to me. I used to like gauge swatch so religiously. But I didn't this time, and it worked out, so we'll see what learnings I take from this for the future. Most likely we have a video incoming where I make a major mistake with my gauge and then have to frog everything, but let's hope that doesn't happen. For the construction of this, it's pretty straightforward, just like what most summer tops are constructed like. You start up here with the collar, and this one is actually pretty long. It already has one of the like cable crossings in it. And then you knit increases for the shoulders over here so that you have a little bit more fabric to work with. And then you split it up for like a front and a back section and work them separately flat. And then the back is just stockinette, and on the front you obviously do this beautiful cable over here. The cable was really simple to do even for a beginner like me. It is a like thicker cable, so there was like some pulling the yarn involved, and I tried to do it with a cable needle at first, but I only have one of them, and it was like a tinier one, maybe like 3mm, I don't know. I'm actually not sure if cable needles come in these different types of sizes. This one just showed up, I didn't get it, so this is the one I have and the one I'm going to be using. It worked alright, but because there's like so many stitches in the cable, they became quite tight on the smaller needle. So I actually went and found a bit of a thicker double pointed needle, and that was a bit easier for me to work with because the stitches didn't like close up as much. It was still a bit of a struggle in the beginning, like for the first 2 crossings. I was kind of unsure what I was supposed to do, like if I was supposed to like let my tension a little bit looser so the stitches have more room, but I like tried to do some research on that and watch some tutorials and stuff like that, and essentially what I got from that was don't do that, like keep your tension as like tight as normally so that the cable actually looks good in the end. And once I continued knitting for a few more rounds and I could like actually see what the cable looks like once it's in the finished garment and not just this like messed up bunch of stitches, it looked good, so I'm quite happy with the way the cable came out. I think I'm ready for a proper cable knit. After that, you just cast on some extra stitches at the underarm, you connect in the round, and you work the body straight down with no waist shaping or anything included in this one. I only made one modification, and I'm very happy that I made that modification. I'm actually not quite sure why it isn't included in the pattern, and that is that I knitted back shaping on this. I usually feel like even if the pattern does include back shaping, I could use more of it. I don't know if my back is like unusually high or something, but to me it always feels like I could knit like 2 extra rows of it. So when I saw that this pattern doesn't have any, I was a bit like unsure if that would work for me, and I thought it would be simple enough to adapt that I just did that. It was a bit more complicated to do than I would have liked, I guess, because for this collar part, you're placing your beginning of round marker at the side, I believe on this one maybe. So this is where you start knitting, and obviously when you're doing like German short rows and stuff like that, it's a lot easier to have it in the middle of the back, which is what I ended up changing. So I had to sit down for like 10 minutes and plan out how I was going to do that so that I could have the beginning of round marker in the back of my neck and then still have the cable in the front and have the increases in the correct spot and all of that. It wasn't like overly complicated to do, but it just involved a little bit of planning. And then I just knitted the entire like top section here until I split for the front and the back section with the beginning of round marker in the mid back. I prefer it in that spot. I think it's nice if your knitting is symmetrical. I feel like it's easier to remember like where to knit what and like knit away from the pattern. But I also understand why it was here, because later for the body it is at the underarm where it makes the most sense. So it did make sense there. I just feel like especially if you're working increases, in my mind it's easier to switch the spot of the beginning of round marker than to like remember where to place the increases if your knitting isn't symmetrical. I don't know how much sense that made, but let me know if you relate to that, or if you would like prefer the beginning of round marker in the same spot, like all throughout the pattern. I don't know, maybe that's a weird preference to have. Anyway, that's like not an issue at all. It's not a critique of the pattern, obviously. That's just my personal preference, and you can rate it either way. For the back shaping though, I do think this pattern could use it, like generally, because the neck does come very high up. So I think if I hadn't knitted back shaping, this would like bother me kind of, that this would like sit so close to my neck. I am very happy I included it. I can still feel it a little bit, but I think that's just this like turtleneck bit, and any more back shaping wouldn't have really fixed it. There also wasn't space for more because I already like turned for my, or this is where the shoulders are and this is where I knitted my shoulder increases to both sides of this tiny little saddle section, I guess you could call it, over here. So there was only so much space between where the increase is placed and where the cable starts over here. So I did my turn every 2 stitches, which is very tight already. And I think I was able to fit like 6 short rows in if I'm correct, but any more wouldn't have really worked. So I'm quite glad I was able to do it that way, and I'm very happy that I decided to make that change. I'm not sure why it's not in the pattern, to be honest, because it wouldn't have been that complicated to add, I guess. I think it would make the pattern a little bit more difficult, because then obviously you have to do increasing on the wrong side of your work as well if you're like working back and forth instead of in the round for these shoulder increases. So I kind of get it, but also I don't feel like the writing of this pattern is so beginner friendly that you would assume that somebody making this pattern couldn't do that. So I'm not sure. Regardless, this is a very cool pattern, and maybe if you're somebody who doesn't normally need the back shaping, this wouldn't bother you as much as it would have bothered me. I'm happy with my change. I'm happy with the rest of this. I'm also quite glad that the curliness here blocked out mostly. It's still like a tiny bit curly. You knit I-cord finishings around the armhole. I don't know if I've mentioned that, but you just like knit this panel in stockinette essentially, and then you pick up stitches around here to knit an I-cord. And before I blocked this, it was curling a lot, to the point where it was like in here. It looked a bit weird. It's still curling a little bit. I don't know how to fix that, but it's a lot better. So I'm very happy with that. And I don't know, I think this top looks really flattering. I'm really happy with the big cable. It looks kind of elegant, I would say. I feel like you can dress this up very easily if you want to, but also you can just wear this casually without it looking weird. So I'm really happy with this. I feel like this is a very versatile project. It was so quick, so fun to do. I think it was very potato chippy to me, at least because of the cable. So it's like knitting a very large stripe. Essentially, you have like this one thing that you can look forward to when you're doing the cable again, even though it's just a few stitches, of course. But I really enjoyed the pattern. I also enjoyed the yarn. I will work with it again, I think. I have 2 like small critiques of it. The first one is that it is splitty. And it is splitty in the way where if you accidentally split it once, there's no way it is going back to its original shape. So if you're like pulling out one of the strands of it, it will stick out forever. And there's some spots in my I-cord definitely where you can kind of see that. I tried to like hide them a little bit when I was weaving in ends and stuff like that, but that was a little bit annoying, and it wasn't the most fun to especially do the I-cord where you're like slipping stitches back and forth so much. So it's okay, but if you're somebody who's very bothered by split yarn, probably not for you. And then the other thing I didn't really enjoy is that this seems to be losing a lot of fibers. I don't know why that is, but when I was winding up one of my balls, there was like a black fluff in front of my yarn winder. And also, one day I like worked on this for hours and hours and hours, and then I felt like I couldn't breathe. And then when I blew my nose, there was like black fibers in my nose because I had been breathing them in all day. I don't know if that's healthy. So that's something that bothered me a little bit, but generally very enjoyable to work with. Feels very nice. It's also a little bit stretchy, which I really enjoy. Not like quite as stretchy as just merino, of course, but even though it has like half cotton, you can see that it has a little bit of give, which is really nice because I've been working with a lot of like cotton and cotton mixes this summer, and I haven't yet found one that does that. Like, all of them have very like cotton-like properties rather than properties of what they are mixed with, if that makes sense. So that's quite nice. I will probably try to make a sweater from this at some point. I think that would be cool. And I can live with the fibers everywhere, I guess, and the splittiness of it. I just have to be careful when knitting. So that was, I think, all about this top that I kind of made on a whim very quickly and maybe abandoned some of my other projects a little bit to completely focus my attention to this one. I have one more finished object that has been on my needles for a little bit longer that you've actually seen before, and that is this one. Do I change now? I haven't had two finished objects in a good while. Admittedly, these are only summer tops, so they're a bit easier and quicker to finish, but I think I'm just going to stay in this one and just show you the other one like that. I did indeed forget about my coffee. It's a good thing I don't mind if it gets cold. I like to live off of the coffee for as long as humanly possible, so the last sip is always cold for me. Anyways, this is what the other one that I made. This is a self-drafted summer top made out of scrap yarn. I made a scrap yarn sweater a while ago. The story of some of my knits is just too long. Like, sometimes I make something and I feel like every time I try to explain how it came to be, I have to go into like a 30-minute rant of what came before it. Once upon a time, I owned this big plastic bag full of cotton yarns, and some of that had just shown up in my stash. Some of that I had bought years ago when crocheting coasters. It was all like very random leftovers, and most of it was colors that I didn't really enjoy. I didn't know what to do with it, so I decided to make a scrap yarn sweater at the beginning of summer because I thought that would be the best way to get rid of as much of the yarn as possible, to get like something somewhat wearable out of it. And still, since none of the yarn was like super expensive or super important to me, I thought if I self-draft this and it goes sideways, or if the colors don't turn out in a way where I like them, it's fine if it is not my most worn item. So I self-drafted a striped scrap yarn sweater, and I ended up liking the construction so much that I decided to make it into a pattern. So that would be the meadow sweater. I designed that meadow sweater, and from my fast scrap yarn sweater I had leftovers, of course. I was so afraid I would run out of yarn while I was working on it, and then I didn't, and then I had a plastic bag full of cotton yarns that I didn't know what to do with once more. A smaller plastic bag this time, but regardless, still one. And I decided to make a scrap yarn top out of it, because what else am I going to do with it? And well, I was already like in the grind of doing all of the stripes, so I didn't want to just do basic stripes again, because I had just been doing that like for 2 full sweater projects. So I decided to do stripes a little bit differently, and this is what came out of it. I really enjoyed this top as well. I'm surprisingly happy with how it turned out. Essentially what I did for up here, for the cast on, I used the ivy top pattern by Petite Knit. So this little stockinette collar and the short rows and the saddle over here, that's from the pattern. I forgot which size I went for. I was intending for this to have a little bit of positive ease, and it really doesn't, which I think worked in my favor with the rest of the top, but I picked a random size, I guess. And then that is where I left the pattern, and I split for like a front and a back section and knitted them flat, back and forth as you do. For the front section, that was pretty simple, and for the back section, because I was doing jogless stripes when I was working in the round, I had been doing this lifted stitch, so I just continued that line down the back when working flat, so I wouldn't have these few random lifted stitches over here and then none anymore. And I think it actually looks quite nice as a little design detail as well. And I did do some I-cord at the edges of the armhole. I just integrated that, and I must say, after knitting this one, I liked my version better. It obviously doesn't look quite as nice under the arm over here, because this is where you cast on stitches, and I guess you're not doing the I-cord here, even though I think you could just do an I-cord cast on and probably fix that issue. So I think if I were to do another summer top like that, I would do an integrated I-cord, and then I would do an I-cord cast on under the arm, and then I think you should have, from what I'm imagining in my head, you should have an I-cord all around the armhole, and you don't have to like pick up stitches and do it later, and that also like prevented the curling a lot for me. So I did the integrated I-cord here. I did it on the back side as well. I was happy to see that it still looked nice, even though I was doing stripes, because I hadn't really tried doing I-cord with stripes before. So I used this dark green color to bind off most of my stitches in I-cord bind off, except these 2 parts over here, because I wanted that shape to kind of follow my bust. That was my idea behind this, and it worked out surprisingly well, even though everything I did here is very janky. I didn't take any notes while making this. I'm pretty sure I'm not gonna be replicating this exactly. Like, if I want to make something with a similar construction at some point, I'm gonna have to kind of come up with it again. For here, I just I knitted a few rows just flat, and then I did pretty rapid decreasing to get more of a circle shape. And that actually really worked in my favor, because it kind of made a cup as well at the same time. Like, there's some space in here because of that. That wasn't really what I was planning to do, but it worked out that way, and it's really practical. And that's also why I said earlier that it's kind of working in my favor, that the positive ease I was planning with just disappeared, because this is like truly hugging my body. which is insane because I did way too little planning and I was way too lucky with all of these coincidences for that to have worked out so well. And then I just bound those stitches off in the I-cord bind off as well. Then it looked really weird because those parts weren't connected. So I did more bind off over here, and then I like all sewed them together in various ways. So it's not my cleanest work, I guess, if you go very close up, but I don't think you can really tell when I'm wearing it. And then I made this second panel down here where I knitted stripes in the other direction and then attached it. That was my big design plan, and I actually think it looks really cool. It has a lot going on, but I enjoy it. So obviously I knitted that panel sideways. It was just a lot of doing stockinette flat, which was mostly boring, and then I tried to like follow the shape of these circles I had made over here. I didn't do the best job. I like decreased way too rapidly, and then I didn't have like a long enough straight section down here, so the shape was a bit difficult to line up, but it did work out and I think it looks okay. Like sometimes when I wear it, you can kind of tell in the middle here that there is a little bit of puckering, but it's fine. It's a scrap yarn top. It wasn't intended to look very polished. And then what happened then? I was running out of yarn like constantly, because that's what happens when you make scrap yarn projects. So I kept going back to my stash and finding more somewhat scrap yarn to add to this. So even this dark green that I did the bind off here, that is a merino yarn that I already added before I started. I also added another white color. And then when I was working on this panel down here, I added some like silk and some like acrylic yarn even here when I just noticed it wouldn't be enough. I think when I got through halfway of this lower panel over here, I weighed it just to estimate if I would have enough yarn, and I pretty much had exactly as much yarn left over as I had needed for the first half of the panel. So I was cutting it very, very close, and obviously since I needed to complete full stripes every time, I did have to add a little bit more yarn, but it worked out in the end. And then I attached the panel, and it looked awkward because my waist is smaller than my bust, but I had just knitted like this second panel essentially straight down, so there wasn't like, it was the same circumference as my bust. So it looked a bit awkward because the upper part of the top was like relatively tight fitting with no ease, and then the lower part was very loose fitting around my waist, and I didn't really like that. So I just went and I unraveled a bunch of rows in the back, and then I just left the front attached and then reattached the back. Which seems like an incorrect solution, but it worked out nicely in the front here where I did these half circle shapes, so I couldn't really change anything here. So I just unraveled where I had attached this until like this point, I guess, and then I reattached the rest and it worked out perfectly fine. I don't know what happened here. I was insanely lucky because I made so many dumb decisions throughout the course of like self-drafting this that it is honestly a miracle how this fits me so well, but it does. So I'm really happy about that. It looks really cool, even though it's so colorful. I've been really enjoying wearing that. It's genuinely comfortable as well. The only thing that's like not quite perfect about it is the ends inside, obviously, because there was a lot of them. I kind of tried to do the same thing that I also did for my scrap yarn sweater, and that I ironed on these fusible interfacing panels. Is this the side with the... No, this is not the side with the ends. This side has ends, and I just cut them very short and ironed over them, and obviously it somewhat holds them into place, but you can also kind of tell that it's like falling off in some places already. It's not the best solution. Like obviously the knitted fabric is very like uneven in a sense compared to maybe like a store-bought t-shirt, so the fusible interfacing has a little bit of trouble sticking onto this. I wouldn't really recommend it for like a project where you're properly trying to make a good project, I guess, but for a scrap yarn project it's kind of fine to me. And realistically, what else am I going to do? I'm not going to weave in every single end for every single stripe over here. That would also just look weird because then the fabric would be super bulky in this spot as well. It's not like that would look any better. So I just did the ironing on the interfacing, and I did that on both sides because it's adding a little bit of structure and stability to the armhole over here. I just wanted to do it on the other side as well so it wouldn't look weird and uneven. Then obviously here I had ends from where I knitted in the round in the beginning, and then for the other ends that were all on the side of this panel that I knitted sideways, I just cut them short and left them there. It feels a little bit forbidden to do that. However, this is like, it's a wavy part of the top, and it's also moving a lot when I wear it, and I don't think ironing anything over it would make any sense at all. There's also the seam there, so the fabric is like weirdly thick. I don't think I could iron anything on there if I wanted to that like actually sticks. And leaving them long wasn't really an option either. That was just super uncomfortable and warm. So I'm just hoping none of my knots come undone, and if they do, I'm just gonna go and fix it somehow. That's my plan for that, but it looks bad on the inside. I also forgot to do armhole increases at first, so I have a bunch of ends over here from where I unraveled. And then I think I changed the way I did this like bust panel once, so I also have a bunch of ends in here somewhere that weren't even like that's just more ends than were already in the design. So I don't know how this top worked out so well, but I'm really happy with it. It looks really nice on. So that was most of what I was working on for the last few weeks. I have one more project on my needles, or on my hook, because I'm crocheting. This is the part I already showed in the last podcast episode. This is my front panel. I'm doing filet crochet because it is fun to do. I thought when I started, it is fun to do. It is just I'm a bit tired of it, to be honest. I'm so slow at crocheting. I'm not good enough at it, so I'm not having the most fun with this project. Admittedly, I do want to get it done, but it is not my favorite project to pick up. So I'm just hoping I can get through it somewhat quickly, so I can then focus on other things again. But this is like my somewhat self-drafted filet crochet top. Hopefully. I got this chart from like a magazine that I have, like an old crochet magazine, where it was included in like a doily pattern. I made some changes to the chart so it could fit on my top next to each other twice. This is what it looks like. I made it a bit narrower, so some of the elements over here in the original chart are a bit bigger, but I kept the essence of the original chart alive. And then the shape of the top I just self-drafted in Excel in like 10 minutes in hopes that that would kind of work out. And it did for the most part. I had to like unravel one of my straps over here and then knit this front part a little bit higher because it looked weird. But now I'm very happy with the fit, so this is going to go here, and then this is how high up it comes, and then this is kind of where the design is going to sit. It is relatively cropped, but I'm pretty glad about that now because I don't think I would like to work on this any longer than necessary. And now obviously I need a back panel. I wasn't quite sure where to go with the back panels, so that just made it take even longer for me to cast on, in addition to me being kind of tired of this. My original plan was to have a smaller design on it that matches the front design. So I would just have taken this like top part of the flower and put it like in the mid back over here, like on the bottom of the top kind of. And somehow the longer I thought about it, the less I enjoyed it. I just thought it didn't really match the front panel as well as I wanted now that I'm seeing it finished. So I had two options for what to do in my mind, and I genuinely couldn't decide between them. So my first idea was just to do the front panel again and just knit the back a little bit higher so that it will fit me, and then just attach them together and have the top look like somewhat reversible. That is a cool idea. However, it means that it'll take a while because that's a lot of like stitches to crochet. And also I wasn't quite sure if I have enough of the crochet thread. I'm using just a random crochet thread I had in stash that my grandma gave to me that has probably existed for longer than me. I don't know if you can tell from the state of the paper inside of this crochet thread that this has been in the back of some wardrobe for a while. So I have a very limited amount. I have 3 balls of this. I assume none of them had been used before. I couldn't tell because also you can't weigh this because it has the paper inside. So if I weigh this, I don't know how much thread I have, which I find very upsetting. But yeah, I had 3 balls of it and I used up pretty much 1.5 for this front panel. When I weighed this, it's like 76 grams. So theoretically, if nobody has taken any of the crochet thread from any of the balls I had in stash, that should mean that I could kind of, cutting it close, knit a back panel that looks like this as well. However, the back panel is gonna have a few more stitches because this is gonna come a little bit higher up. So I wasn't quite sure if I would have enough yarn, and I really didn't want to run out and have to buy more or like do some ugly solution with a different color or whatever. And since I really noticed I'm not picking this project up enough to finish it in time for summer, I decided to just knit a blank version of the back panel. So just do empty squares all over, and I finally managed to convince myself to cast it on. I didn't get very far yet. Admittedly, I only did this last night, so I would have something to show you in my podcast episode. Because I was saying last time already, I don't want this to become an abandoned project. And I think if for this podcast episode, I had nothing to show for that would have maybe felt a little bit like an abandoned project to me, so I did cast it on. And I got pretty far in already. It's going a little bit quicker than what I was remembering, which is good. So I'm hoping I can just crank this back panel out in a few days. It's still slow. I'm not great at crocheting, I guess. And then for my plan for what to do with this once the back panel is done, I don't have much of one. I know that I'm going to attach the straps together at the shoulders. So this is going to go here, and then the back panel straps are going to be sewn onto this. And then for the sides of it, I would kind of just like to try a few different options. I can either like fully attach them. I have like pretty much 0 ease factored into this, so that should still fit me. So that's one option, or my first idea was actually to only attach them partly. So this is the underarm, and then maybe just attach a few centimeters and have this like large split hem kind of situation. That would maybe look cool, but I also thought it would maybe be fun to either like do some I-cord ties or just get some nice looking ribbon and just thread that through one of the squares over here and just tie the panels together on the side. I think that might also look nice. So I'm not quite sure yet. I think I will just get to the point where I have the shoulders attached and see what it looks like on me, and then make a decision then. So that's my plan with that one. And then other than that, I currently don't have anything on my needles because, well, I just said in the beginning that this came from outside from drying, so I did cast this off last night, which means I now get to cast on something new. That's one of the most exciting parts of knitting and crocheting, I guess, but I'm going to be knitting again. I'm kind of done with the crocheting part. I have plans this time, many plans and acquisitions, which is cool. Usually this section is a bit short, and I'm always afraid when this section is a little bit longer because that usually means I'm going to tell you a bunch of plans and then about 3% of them are going to happen. I have one that's definitely going to happen, and I think the other ones are pretty solid as well. I've been thinking about them for a while. It's been brewing in the back of my mind. My most important and most immediate plan is that I'm going to be knitting another meadow sweater. It is technically my third sample. I never know if I should count my first sample properly because it is like the blueprint, but I also made a bunch of changes for the second version, so they're like cousins, not sisters, I guess. So I'm going to be doing a third version, and I spontaneously decided to do so last night because, I don't know, I was chatting with my testers and what their plans for the design are, and I think most of them are using the recommended yarn, which is the BC Garden Big BO Balance. And a lot of them are also doing very colorful versions and striped versions and all of that, which I'm super happy about. I'm really excited to see all of the like variety of what you can do with this pattern, but there wasn't really anybody who wanted to do like a solid color version. And I would just really like to see what the design looks like in just one basic color without the stripes, because that is like one thing you could do with this pattern, I guess. And when I'm releasing it, I would like to have like a few Ravelry projects maybe going on already where people can take some inspiration. And I would just love for there to be just a solid color version, like a basic. And I also kind of want to have like a warmer version because the samples I have right now, the first one is just cotton and the second one is a wool cotton blend. And then a lot of my testers are also doing more summery versions with like cottons and cotton blends and stuff like that. So I would just like to have like one sample that is a bit warmer that I can maybe also wear throughout the winter. And I decided to get some drops soft tweed, which is a yarn I've never tried before, but I've been curious about. I've never done anything with tweed. I think it looks really cute, very like wintry and cozy, I guess. And it'll just be nice to have like a cheaper yarn option in the project section as well. So I think I can pull that off pretty quickly. I didn't want to like derail all of my other plans completely, but also I feel like I've like practiced that sweater twice now. I have a completely like finished, edited pattern that I can just follow without thinking. And I also don't have to do any color changes, which is generally costing the most time because for the scrap yarn version, I was like cutting my yarn every second round and then tying the ends together, which was taking so much time. And then also the stress of having to pick the next color was horrible. And then for my like proper second sample version, I obviously didn't have to pick the colors and there was just 3 of them. So it was all chill and I could leave them attached and like twist them around each other and whatever. But still every time I came to the beginning of round, I had to like twist them around each other and rearrange them and everything. So that was just, it was taking a little bit. So I think I can just crank out like a solid color version quickly, I'm hoping. And I'll just be knitting that along with my testers. I've done that for my last test knit call as well when I designed the Lumi scarf in the winter. I had a small tester group with me, and I was also knitting a sample along with them that I then gifted away for Christmas. So that was like, I don't know, it was really nice to do, because you're like part of this knit along group chat where everybody's like talking about, oh, I've gotten this yarn and now I'm doing this and now I'm at this part of the sweater, and you're just there as the designer, and you can obviously hype people up, but it's not like you're really participating. So I just think it's kind of fun to make another sample along with everybody. I think maybe that's something I'm going to start doing. I shouldn't make any promises like that, but I kind of like the idea of designing something and then knitting a second sample along with the testers. I think that makes a lot of sense. Anyway, that's what I'm going to be doing. I picked like a jeans blue color, which is very basic for me. I have a lot of blue, but I just genuinely think it looks quite nice on me, and it's going to be a basic sweater. It can be a basic color that I can wear with everything, and I'm really excited for it. I'm very much looking forward to making this pattern once without feeling stressed about it, because it is like a little bit of pressure if people are like already expecting you to get a good result and you're just trying to figure out what the hell you're doing. So I'm just happy I can follow my pattern. I've printed it out actually. I'm never sure if people print out knitting patterns still. I really don't. I have everything on my tablet because I find it super practical. I can just like draw over everything and then erase it if I don't need it anymore, or if I'm changing something. That just seems like the simplest thing to me. I think some people still print out charts, but like full written patterns like this, I don't know. This is what it currently looks like. I might change the photos, but I don't know yet. It depends on if I find somewhere greener to take photos, because it's been incredibly hot and everything outside is an ugly, dry brown color, and that does not go with the meadow vibe. So I've been trying to find a cool spot to take like properly green photos where the grass is green. I think you can tell here that the tree is green, but the grass really isn't. So I would like to find a spot with green grass to do a second attempt at photos, but I don't know if I will find one. If not, this will probably be the final photos. But yeah, this is my current version. It's so fun to see it printed out. It's like it's real. Anyway, that's my most important plan, and the one I'll be working on over the next few weeks once my yarn arrived. As I said, I spontaneously decided to do this last night, so I ordered the yarn last night and I'm hoping it will soon be on the way to me. I have some more plans. I've actually sat down this week and done like proper planning with everything I have laying around in stash. I've kind of felt motivated because I use up all of my cotton scraps to also use up all of my other scraps. Not that I'm not continuously trying to do that, but I think I'm taking it more seriously now. And the first thing I would like to use up, this is going to be a very small project, is this here. This is a silk yarn by Expression Fiber Arts, and I've obviously tried to make a gauge swatch from this and then thrown it in my little whip basket, and then it's gotten tangled with all of the other needles in there, which is why it looks like that. This is my gauge swatch, by the way. I've really just tried to get somewhat close to what my stitch count might be. This is on 3mm needles, and this is most likely going to be like a little summery scarf. This is like 50 grams, 200 meters of silk yarn, so what else am I really going to do with this? I was thinking about self-drafting something, but then I was kind of too lazy, so I looked at some options, and I found another designer that I have a similar relationship with as I had with 𝗙𝗜𝗡𝗏, in that I constantly see her patterns, think they are so cool, save them in my favorites, recommend them to everybody, and then I somehow never get to making one of the patterns actually. And I mean, this is just a very small pattern. It is called Jackie Bandana by Susanne Müller. I feel like in every pattern roundup, her name comes up, and she has such cool things. So I don't know how it's happened that I've never gotten to making any of them. But I would be kind of curious about trying that. What I like about it is that it's like a triangle-shaped bandana. As are most bandanas, there's like a billion patterns for them everywhere. But what I enjoy is that the like triangle tips are very narrow. So if I were to become a person who like wears the bandana around their head, which I would like to be, but somehow it never works out for me. I don't know if it's because of the glasses or if I'm just like untalented in putting it on, but it somehow never really seems to look good when I try. Anyway, that's what I enjoyed about it, because it was like narrower there, so it seemed easier to tie in the back in case I did want to do that. And even if I'm just wearing it as a scarf, I think it will still look very nice. The pattern is kind of recommending this yarn weight, so I think it would be cool to use up this yarn and like try out this designer and see what her patterns look like. I also have a sock pattern of hers in my favorites that I might do at some point, because I still have a little bit of a sock yarn laying around. I'm not sure yet if that'll happen, to be honest, because I'm still not the biggest fan of sock knitting, but we'll see. And then I have some leftovers from this top that I made. that I showed earlier. This is my leftovers. It's like almost a full ball. Okay, not quite, to be honest. It's like 2/3 of a ball. And I also have this monstrosity still. This is a yarn that I was gifted and then made a very chunky, fun scarf with. And this is what I have left over. And a pattern that I've been obsessed with ever since I started knitting is the beanie number 6 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. It is like a basic beanie up here, and then the brim is done with a boucle yarn, so it's just very large and fluffy. And I obviously am not going to get the boucle yarn, I'm just going to use this one. And then I think for the top part of the hat, I'm going to use this one because the thread in this one, in this red one, is black as well. So I'm hoping I can pair this and it will look like it goes together. I'm not going to use the beanie number 6 pattern because it is written for a very different gauge than both of these yarns. So that doesn't really make sense, but I'm going to like take inspiration from what that looks like. And I think I'm just going to find like a free basic hat pattern to do the top part of the hat, and then the brim I will just attach somehow. I don't think that would be super difficult. It is, however, not quite time yet to think about hats. Like, it is still very much summer, so I don't know if that'll be in my more immediate plans or whether that will happen at some point soon. But that is as far as my planning that I'm definitely decided on goes, I would say. We'll see when I get to all of these projects. I'm now gonna prioritize doing this crochet project, this like little bit of back panel that I have over here, until my yarn arrives for my meadow sweater, and I hope I can get a lot of it done until then, so that when I start the meadow sweater, and I'm not going to want to put it down because it's such a fun pattern to make, I don't completely forget about this one. I'm hoping this is done by the next podcast episode. I'm hoping. I'm not going to make any promises because I might regret that, but I'm holding out hope for this to magically get done. And then I think I need a crochet break for a while. I don't know how I used to be crocheting so much. I think I just didn't have the comparison with knitting and how much faster I am at it. I mean, I made 2 summer tops in the last few weeks, and somehow this is all I got done on crochet. So, well, I started the project, I'm gonna finish it. I don't abandon my projects, usually, except a few. That was all I had to share for now, I think. I hope your summer knitting is going well, and I'll see you next time.